now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Rev Nathaniel W Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Reverend Blackwell. Let me say good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning. Never goodbye and never good night. We're happy to be joining you from wherever you are, that you're picking up this broadcast that we hope will continue to grow and improve as time goes by. And welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're just common folk trying to do the will of God. And the title of the program is It's Time, because it's time to talk about practical application of our belief system, of our Christianity, of our social activism, and our social justice. Because, believe me, we have a lot of work to do. Our marching orders come from the book of James, chapter 5, and verse 4. I'm going to read it right now, and then the backup scripture from Deuteronomy. James 5, chapter 4 says, "Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth." And what is that saying? That's saying that people have labored honestly, worked honestly, toiled honestly, looking for what the promise to be kept that was made, and that promise has not been honored. So the person has to go away without their money, or come back from time to time asking you for money, making them appear to be begging with their hat in their hand. And God himself is not pleased with such scandalous treatment of the working people of the world, let alone of the United States of America. Our backup scripture, just to give you a backup scripture, goes all the way back to the Old Testament, Deuteronomy chapter 24, picking up the reading at verse 14, which says, "Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. At his day," that means when you get through working, "thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor, and setteth his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee." Now that's two readings, two acknowledgments, two observations of God, one in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament, that a laboring person is to be paid for their labor. What did that say about the United States of America? Well, we have 250 years, according to the 16th president of these United States, Abraham Lincoln, of unrequited toil that is yet to be atoned or accounted or repaired or recompensed or rewarded. And that means that this nation is guilty of depriving working people, employed people that have toiled honestly, faithfully, loyally in this country. This country owes a great debt that has yet to be owned up to. Is that right? That has never been honored. And so we see that if we are going to be a great nation, if America is ever going to be what it speaks of being idealistically in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution of the United States of America, then you're going to have to begin making some amends. Is that right? Sort of like the people at Georgetown University. The president there has started a program because they recognize that the descendants of the 272 slaves that were owned by that university way back in 1838 and that were sold to pay the debts, that president of that Georgetown University said he needs to begin to amend or atone And so they're trying to find the descendants. And one of the descendants was 63-year-old lady. I can't think of her name right now, but she has the opportunity now, and she is attending Georgetown University for free. Hey, that's a bit of help, reparation, and that should be emulated all across this nation because all of the major corporations in this country have their hands bloody from the toil of the slaves who labored to help build this country. And the record is not hard to find, and it cries out against us. And if the Civil War was any indicator, God is still requiring us to pay for the injustice that was heaped upon the African people that were stolen from their homeland, transported across the Atlantic, and forced to labor here for nothing. Remember, slavery was at bottom an employment issue. Only the people who were working for free and were working against their will and had no say in the matter. But that does not alleviate the requirement or the obligation of the descendants, not only of the slaves, but of the slave owners who profited. Remember, you had 250 years of slavery with no pay. That means you had 250 years of profit and benefit on the part of those who were the slave owners. And where did all of that profit and benefit go? I went into building up this country to make it the behemoth that it is today. There is no self-made man. There's no person in America, black or white, can say that they're self-made. You standing on the shoulders or the backs or reaping the fruit or the benefit or the advantage of others who did not get that benefit and did not get that advantage, whether you're in Texas or whether you're in Tennessee or whether you're in California or Chicago. It's the same thing. This entire nation is guilty of crimes that Frederick Douglass said would shame a nation of savages. Labor is important, and the salary and a just recompense, a just reward for labor is vital. That's how I pay my bills. I get a paycheck. I go down to the store. I go down to the utility place. I go down to the car lot. I get the things that I need because I've toiled honestly. And if I get paid a just wage, I can continue to grow. Isn't that right? Now, the problem with this scenario is that now in our economic system that we have, jobs are not plentiful anymore. And the jobs that are there are not paying what it takes in order to live a good life. And when I'm talking about good, it's not what Donald Trump is talking about when he means good. Heck, his father gave him $14 million to get started with. Where am I going to get $14 million to get started on anything? I do good to get $14. And so when I talk about good, I'm speaking from my perspective. A roof over my head, clothes on my back, shoes on my feet, ability to go backwards and forward, transportation. Pray God, let me get to the hospital or get to some kind of health care facility when I have the need, if I can't get preventive care. And at least those things should be offered to every citizen of these here United States of America. We can't tolerate homeless people living down in the riverbed in Santa Ana and under the freeways here in Los Angeles and all across this nation. We can't tolerate that in the richest country on the face of the earth, with all of these vacant houses, with all of these vacant buildings, and yet we allow our own citizens to languish outside, languish in the streets. While you think God is pleased with such thing God is pleased not. And we have to begin to atone and begin to make those type of reparations as well for the deeds done by this nation against the bulk of its citizen. We used to say it was only the black man that was poor, but now you see that poor are coming out from everywhere. A lot of wealth has disappeared or has been taken or redistributed, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. Instead of wealth distribution being that the rich giving to the poor, no, you have the poor being robbed by the rich. And yes, I use the word robbed, and not advisedly either. You're being robbed in your finances, robbed in your interest rates, robbed in the prices that you pay for goods and services. And these issues are a stink in God's nostrils. My brothers and my sisters, how can this nation hope to be what God called us to be, or what our politicians say that we are, a shining city on the hill, when we do such dark and ugly things to our own brothers and sisters? Blessed be the name of the Lord. And so if these things are merely some of the preliminary issues that we have to talk about. In broadcast past, days past, we've tried to go over how that most of our citizens got to this place. You didn't get here because you put yourself there. You were placed there by this government. You were placed there by the federal agencies and the bureaucracies, the bureaucrats that work for those federal agencies that efficiently and affirmatively granted access and growth and progress to one group, and at the same time denied access and growth to the other group, so that you have one group coming out of the war, World War I and World War II, that had an economic floor placed upon them. Don't forget that the Federal Housing Administration, as it was called at that time, financed the building of the suburbs. 90% of the cost of a house was financed by the federal, was underwritten by the federal government of the United States. And the restrictive covenants and the funding guidelines or the loan requirements were such that in this nation, one part of the citizenry was allowed to benefit, but the other part of the citizenry, which had likewise fought in the wars and had likewise suffered and died in the wars to guarantee democracy or whatever, freedom or liberty overseas, that we did not have here at home. The other segment of the population was what? Denied access to that type of funding, not because they lacked credit, not because they lacked money, not because they did not meet the qualification of being citizens, but strictly because of the historical precedent that had been put in place from the founding of the country, from slavery. We really didn't get that far away from the Dred Scott decision. Some of us say even now we are still suffering under the legacy of that. And so the reason why we have Nicholson Gardens is because all people were not allowed to buy houses in Inglewood or Glendale or El Segundo or Panorama City or Lakewood or Burbank or Maywood. or any of those little towns out there that used to be called sundown towns. That means you had to get out of there. If you weren't of the majority culture, majority race, you had to get out of there before the sun went down. And with that type of practice, and that was the culture of these United States all across this nation, whether you were in the north, the south, the east, or the west. Those cities I mentioned, most of those cities were right here in good old California. But California, as you can see, was not so good to all of its citizens. And we're tippy-toeing around saying that the racial discrimination at that time and the segregation that was practiced, that was the norm, that was the SOP, greatly hindered the descendants of the slaves from enjoying the benefits and the advantages of the United States of America in the early parts of this nation's growth and building, especially from 1900 on up to even now. Remember, there's a huge and a growing chasm, wealth gap, and abyss between the people who are making uber amounts of wealth and people like me who are just barely getting by. And that is because of historic patterns of political segregation, segregation that was mandated by federal law, housing that was mandated by federal decrees, as well as the enforced by the local state agencies and municipalities. And we have to acknowledge the hurt. We must acknowledge the injury and harm that was done to one segment of our citizenry while we were so busy benefiting the other segment. Dr. Ira Katz-Nelson, as I've said on another broadcast, has two books out. One is a very thick book called Fear Itself, and the other book is entitled When Affirmative Action Was White. And I would encourage you to avail yourself. It's not as thick as the other book, because a lot of the facts and the figures that were in the first book, Fear Itself, have been compressed and into the comprehensive volume that deals more with the programs that did put this nation on the road to economic wealth, while at the same time guaranteeing that the other segment of this population was put on the road to economic harm. And you'll be amazed when you look and see. You look in the congressional record, you read the writings or the bills that were enforced, the hearings that were held in Washington with these old Southerners that were in charge, Rankin and Bilbo and Eastland and so many others, who were the chairman of all of the critical social programs that were so needy to act as an economic engine to restart this economy. And you can bring yourself up to speed in one day almost if you apply yourself. And then you can see where Social Security was denied to one segment of the population for over 25 years. And which means that the segment that was restrained from participating in the Social Security program did not get started on paying into those benefits until 1954, even though the first dividends of Social Security began to be paid out in 1942. The program started in 1935. Now, you may not like facts, you may not like dates and figures, but those are some dates and some facts that you need to know. And in other words, that was a head start given to one segment of the population that was denied to the other segment of the population. And the same when it came to housing. The reason why housing is as it is because of prior housing policy practices. Not practices by private people, but practices put in place by our own federal government. And please believe me, you're going to have to make amends, reparations, recompense for that. Now, I grew up in Houston, Texas, and a lot of my classmates now live out in places that we couldn't even look that way when the sun went down. Sugar Land and Richmond, places like that. But they were blessed in the latter years, beginning probably in the 70s, to buy those beautiful homes out there, beautiful homes. But that still does not atone for the fact that from the 1900s on up through 1968, we were marginalized and not allowed to buy those homes previously because the housing prices had gone up by that time. And the reason why there's so much wealth on the one segment of the society and so much poverty on the other segment of society is even just basing off of that 1900 to 1968 jump start or head start that was given to our brothers and sisters of a different hue. I wanted to mention also that the shooting that happened about 2 weeks ago at the Parkland, Florida, at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school, what a tragedy that was. But I want to commend those students, and I want to commend that faculty for speaking up, speaking truth to power. Those are students. They don't have degrees. They haven't even graduated from school yet, but they're speaking truth to power. They put Senator Marco Rubio on the defensive. He called himself a photo op to be seen with all of these students who had been so traumatized and victimized by this rampage, and they put him on blast. And thank God for the students. I believe the students are going to lead this thing, and that we are going to get meaningful gun control going forward. Notice, if you please, that the state of Florida was willing and immediately passed a $67 billion budget to begin to arm teachers and to arm people around the schools, even though the teachers and the students said, no, that's not the answer. But they are speaking out and pushing back against the National Rifle Association and against their cronies and their lackeys and their sycophants in the Congress and of the United States and in the White House. And so much so that even President Trump has had to backtrack and say that possibly we should be able to put a law in place that you can't buy these assault weapons until at least you're over 21 years of age. And getting pushback from the National Rifle Association about that now. But who started that? Why, it was the children. It was the students. As the Bible says, a little child shall lead them. God knows we've shed enough blood on our school campuses just going back to Columbine, if not before. Heck, when I was coming along, we had the tower shooting in the University of Texas, where a college student went up to the tower and was just shooting people down on the ground for whatever reason. And so these things are not new, but there's a segment of the population and that is very influential in Congress who would have you to think that you're crazy if you say we need gun control. They'll tell you guns don't kill people. People do. Well, where do the people kill you with? They kill you with them guns. So we need some background checks and other serious methods and manners of gun control in this nation. They hate gun control. They hate to be regulated. The stock market didn't want to be regulated. The stock market hated regulation. The stock market hated control. And what happened? Greenspan and his ilk pulled away the regulation with the help of the Congress and Bill Clinton and Phil Gramm and all that lot. And what did we do? They plunged the nation back into a depression back there in 2007. And so many people lost their wealth, lost their housing, and a lot of people have yet to recover from that. I've yet to recover from that. That was a devastating blow. Why? Because there was no regulation and there was no control. Well, this is what the NRA wants. They don't want you to regulate or control guns. You know, they make money off of selling guns. Florida is an open carry state. And yet people with guns did not go into the school and stop the man with the gun, giving the lie to the statement that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Come to find out that the good guys were standing around outside, violating their own policies, their own SOP after Columbine, and said they wouldn't wait outside. They'd go in immediately and neutralize and confront the shooter. But no, they didn't do that. They didn't want to get shot. They wanted to go home like everybody else. So let the man kill 17 folks before they finally, before the shooting ended. Actually, the young man was able to march out with the retreating students, and according to the report, he wasn't arrested until after he had been to McDonald's and had something to eat. And so he killed as many people as he wanted to kill because the people with the guns wouldn't go in. So just having a gun, there's no guarantee that you're going to stop somebody else with a gun. But if we have no guns, then you have an argument. But thank God for the students. Thank God for their courage. And it's amazing the similarities. You know, God has a strange way of working things out. And he has raised up these students, and they are articulate, and they are on fire. And where these politicians are looking at them as statistics, they are remembering their fellow students and their fellow teachers, the coaches that they saw killed that day trying to protect them from somebody with a gun. And so more power to them. And let us support these kids because they're going to lead the way out of this dark Egypt of gun violence that is plaguing our cities here in America. I believe I saw the man tell me I only had 5 minutes, about 5 minutes ago. So I want to begin to close out and ask you to continue to hit the subscribe button right below that YouTube. If you're looking on YouTube, hit like. If you're seeing it on Facebook, if you're looking at it on K2IM Media, we encourage you to contact the station and let us know what you think about the broadcast, about the program, suggestions that you might have. You might send them to me, Rev Nathaniel W Martin, care of K2IM Media, or you may send them to me directly, Nathaniel NW Martin 7 at yahoo.com. Don't call me on the phone. But by all means, communicate. Let's get a conversation going across America. God bless you, and may he continue to sustain you, and may you always get paid.